What's going on YouTube? It's your boy Dummy Wormy. I'm coming at you with another video. And when it comes to Assassin's Creed Shadows, this has been a game that everybody has been dreading ever since the initial launch. When we saw individuals like Yasuke and Aoi, people were turned away from this game, considering it's set in feudal Japan, and people were really looking forward to playing as a Japanese character in a franchise built all around assassins. Wouldn't it make more logical sense to just play as a ninja? But no, because of modern day politics and modern day ideology, you must now play as Yasuke. And ever since the official trailer dropped, it has been ratioed. Fans have been turning away from this. You could come right on over here and you could see that it spouts a massive 595,000 downvotes to only 299,000 upvotes. And it wasn't just the Western trailers that were getting ratioed like this. We also had the Japanese trailer getting ratioed, coming in at a whopping 56,000 downvotes to only 5.4k upvotes. This game was being rejected, and you really shouldn't be having the Japanese audience be rejecting this game, considering that is where this game is taking place, in feudal Japan, but even they hate it. And following the launch of Star Wars Outlaws, one of the most bugged games in history, Ubisoft thought it would be a smart idea to delay the game till February 2025, proving that Ubisoft thought that this game needed more work, just like Star Wars Outlaws did. Mainly because they specifically cited Star Wars Outlaws as being one of the lead reasons as to why they were going to delay this game. Now, there's been all sorts of reports, all sorts of discussions about this game, about what gamers are not looking forward to, about what gamers have been rejecting, whether it's the DEI nonsense, whether it's the progressive politics. And because of all the chaos around this game, people have been wondering whether or not this game would break even, whether or not this game would be a success for Ubisoft, or would Ubisoft actually be able to make money with this game. And it's starting to look like even Ubisoft doesn't think that, because you come over here to Fandom Pulse. Assassin's Creed executive producer reveals AAA games need to sell 10 million copies to break even. Now, when it comes to this number, I think he's talking a little bit more hyperbolic, but it's no real shocker considering this is coming from Ubisoft, a company that is now going around boasting that they're putting out quadruple A rated games, which just means your games cost even more money to produce. It's no real shocker that they think they need to sell 10 million copies just to break even, but why don't we see this? Mark Alexis, the executive producer for Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed franchise, revealed that AAA games need to sell around 10 million copies in order to break even. During an interview at XDS24, CoCo discussed how video games development costs are increasing year over year. He shared, "We are in a complex and tough economic situation right now, at least in the game industry. Well, also worldwide, but we've all seen our costs rising, our profits shrinking. In a way, there's a lot of very, very intense competition, but the cost of building games has probably increased tenfold since the first Assassin's Creed and the one that's coming out this year. Both costs, complexity, amount of people has probably risen by a factor of 10. Now, it really shouldn't be rising that much. Costs are going to naturally rise as the economic situations go up, as we are in an inflation period right now. So that makes logical sense. But you don't need that many people actually working on the game. That would actually bring your costs down. Your overhead would bring your costs down. But you're now some corporate stooge, so you have insane costs to deal with that is making these games cost exorbitant amount of money. This is also one of the reasons they were getting into the whole DEI nonsense, the ESG stuff, signing on with BlackRock, State Street, all these people, because that money was helping cut back on the amount of costs that we're doing, and it was easy money flowing inwards. Game production is a costly adventure, and that was helping them, but now it's actually hurting them in the long run. When you look at who succeeds, at least in the AAA space, so what I'm going to say applies to, like, mostly premium games, more traditional kind of AAA games, you have 10 games in any given year that will sell about 10 million copies. Now, that's a little hit or miss. I do think the 10 million copy number is a little high for what they actually need to be bringing in profit wise, but we did find out that when it came to like games like Star Wars Outlaws, for example, they needed to sell around 3 million copies just to break even, and they didn't even approach that amount. We've been seeing how much game prices are going up. We've been seeing how production values are going up, and by doing that, they're needing to sell more copies of each game just to break even. And when it comes to this, I am gonna say I think that 10 million copy mark is probably a little too high, mainly because we've been seeing a lot of games sell around 8 million copies or somewhere around there. I think that's more of a valid area to actually market, but a game like Assassin's Creed Shadows is gonna need to sell a lot of copies just to break even. And I can understand why he's saying this, because Ubisoft hasn't had a hit all year long. He then explained the reason I'm quoting the 10 million copies kind of mark is from what I've seen and how I've seen costs, our costs and costs of competitors. And everything leaks in our industry. So you have privileged information on where the competition is going. But mostly, I estimate that 10 million copies, give or take 2 million copies, is mostly what you need to break even. But you have only 10 games that breach that every year. And when I actually think about this year, for example, what games probably even came close to that mark, came close to the break even mark, would have been, you know, games like Helldivers, for example, games like Stellar Blade, Black Myth Wukong, games like that are the games that actually came close to that overall goal. And that's one of the reasons why I'm also saying I'm kind of pulling back from, you know, the $10 million mark. But again, some of those studios that I did mention, you know, Stellar Blade and Helldivers 2, those come from AA studios, not AAA studios, so give or take. But when you do look at some of the AAA games that are coming out nowadays, people aren't really positive on them. People aren't really gravitating towards them as much as they used to, and that has been affecting the bottom dollar. Another good example of this outside of Ubisoft is Dragon Age, for example, and that game isn't actually producing well. You can see in basic numbers how many people have been checking out of that game and how many people aren't even interested in playing that game nowadays. But we'll continue. Cote then broke down what those 10 games look like. Out of those 10, you'll have probably 3 sports games, you'll have 4 games on established franchises, and probably 2 or 3 games that are surprise hits coming from nowhere. But that leaves very, very little room and wiggle room for success. So I'm trying to steer Assassin's Creed franchise through that. And that's an important takeaway from this. I am thinking that when I'm looking at all this, he's talking in generalities. Do I really think Assassin's Creed Shadows needs to sell 10 million copies just to break even? No, but I'm willing to bet that it does need to sell around 7-8 million copies to actually produce a profit. Maybe a little less, maybe drop 1 million copies and say it needed to make around 6 million copies just to break even. All of this does reflect back onto Ubisoft. Every Ubisoft game is reflecting onto Ubisoft, and we've been seeing how their games have been performing over the past couple of years. They've been dwindling in response. People have been turning away from Ubisoft, mainly because when it comes to Ubisoft, outside of the DEI nonsense, people are rejecting Ubisoft's slop that they keep giving out to people. This corporate garbage that is always sanitized, is always the exact same thing, hits all the marks, and it's boring. It's no longer fun, and people are tired of that slop. Plus, it's always filled with bugs, and people have been rejecting that. So when you take into account the amount of copies that this game actually needs to sell, that's hurting its bottom dollar, and that makes it harder and harder for this game to actually break even. And later on in this interview, he brings up other games. He's talking about having to compete with himself. He's talking about Assassin's Creed Odyssey and how Assassin's Creed Odyssey will be taking away money from Assassin's Creed Shadows because more people will go out and buy a $20 game than the $80 game. Shocker! Who would have thought that this would ever actually be a thing? More people would prefer to buy the cheaper, better quality game over your overpriced slop that you keep shoveling out there. And right now, Ubisoft really can't afford to have a massive fumble with this game. considering when it comes to Star Wars Outlaws, we're getting reports that it only sold 1 million copies in total. And before it just hit Steam, where it's coming in at one of the lowest rated games over on Steam already, it's already $20 in general areas for people to pick up right now. This was a $70 game and it's already gone on sale by roughly 30%. Ubisoft needs a win. Ubisoft needs to make money, and when it comes to Assassin's Creed Shadows, they have a massive uphill battle, mainly because you have, stories like this. Ubisoft released a statement to Japanese players amidst massive backlash to Assassin's Creed Shadows, which boiled down to shut the hell up and buy our slop. Oh, you also had Ubisoft runs to New York Times to attack players in defense of Assassin's Creed Shadows, which was them continuing to show disingenuous arguments after disingenuous arguments and just call the fan base and the general players criticizing the game, criticizing the marketing strategies of Ubisoft and Assassin's Creed Shadows as nothing more than bigots, racist, and defaming them the entire time. Man, that's really how you convince people to come out here and buy your games. Attack the audience. That's a smart idea. And you want to know what else hurts your bottom dollar and makes people not want to buy your game? When you yourself come out here and say it's the worst thing you've ever seen. Ubisoft executive says Assassin's Creed Shadows devs thinks it's the worst thing they've ever seen. All this hurts your bottom dollar. All this hurts the amount of copies you're going to be selling. All this makes it harder for you to actually sell games. And you need to sell games in order to make money. And then when it comes to this $10 million mark, this massive high bar that they need to see, you want to know why maybe Assassin's Creed Shadows might actually have a higher threshold in order to actually break even? Well, it's because when they did that massive delay, that increased the costs. That added 20 million euros onto the bottom dollar, which roughly translates to $21 million. Ubisoft can't afford to have a fumble like this. Ubisoft is in massive water right now. They're having calls from their own executive board to make them go private. They're seeing people come in here and say that we need to sell off. Ubisoft can't afford to have this game fumble like it is, and all signs point to this game actually not breaking even this time. When you get these numbers coming out here, when you're seeing all this go on, when you have the bad PR, and when you yourself are saying that you need to sell 10 million copies just to break even, you're hurting your own bottom dollar and you're proving that Assassin's Creed Shadows might be one of the biggest flops of next year. But I'm going to leave it there. Let me get your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it up friends, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell for every time I put out a new video live, guys. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.